right, you all know Dr. Sebastian Gorka, but you may not know he is now the host of America First on the Salem Radio Network. I have been there. It is a terrific show. As I always tell him, he has the voice of a James Bond villain. More importantly, he has the heart of a James Bond villain. He is a military. You should just show up with a cat, I think. It's good to see you. How are you?
Very well, Drew. Very well. Good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
The show is great, by the way. Your show is terrific. I have to tell you.
Look, getting paid to talk, it's crazy, Drew. You know,
that's right. So let us. There's so much to talk about that. You know, we invited you on because we thought the State of the Union was going to be today, but there's so much to talk about anyway. Let's start, since I've been jawing about Venezuela. How far do you think Trump and the administration are willing to go in supporting Guaido and attacking Maduro?
I don't know. It depends. Have you snuck a look at John Bolton's yellow pad yet or not? I mean, I think we have to give John the Troll of the Year award for that one. That was epic. Look, I'll tell you what the president is. The president is instinctually a non-interventionist in terms of military intervention. He's always driven by the idea of bringing our boys, bringing our girls home from wherever they're stuck on some kind of military mission. But at the end of the day, this is about a broader message. It's a broader message about the cost of socialism, human rights abuses, and basically what Maduro represents in terms of an ideology that, thank you, Francis Fukuyama, did not die on, in 1989, November the 9th. So, I'll repeat what John said at that press conference yesterday. He said, look, nothing's off the table, but I'm not going to get into details. That's how you do it, Drew. You telegraph zero except commitment, and you let the bad guys wallow in lack of information. But $7 billion worth of sanctions immediately, another 11 billion over the next 12 months. That's more than enough to make Maduro's government collapse overnight.
It's amazing to me that all these people are talking about whether Donald Trump called Roger Stone about WikiLeaks, while meanwhile, Trump is giving Putin hell in Venezuela. I mean, all Putin wants is for that state to collapse and for Maduro to stay in power. He loves this stuff.
Yeah, let's just stop on Roger Stone for a second. I'm no fan of Roger Stone. Roger Stone is a self-aggrandizing weirdo. That's what he is. But the idea that how can you have Russian collusion if you need Roger Stone to email WikiLeaks about what they have in terms of email? I mean, if you have Russian collusion, then Donald Trump calls up Vlad and says, Vlad, have you given me today's dump of stolen emails? I mean, this is the absurdity, the Alice in Wonderland world we live in. How many administrations in the last 100 years has the president greenlit the targeting and the killing of 200 Russian mercenaries? I'll tell you, Drew, none. Not even when we went into Afghanistan secretly in the 1980s did we have hundreds of Russians targeted by our intelligence operators. This after Reagan, is perhaps one of the toughest regimes we have ever seen on Moscow. But if you watch CNN or read the New York Times, you get exactly the opposite.
It really is Alice in Wonderland. I mean, I'm convinced now that this is this massive investigation into Trump is an absurdity. But the fact that in the meantime, not only is CNN following this breathlessly, but they're basically giving Maduro a pass and supporting the kinds of people who support him. So let's talk about the wall. Now, I always feel I have to preface this. You are a staunch defender of Donald Trump. I don't think I've ever heard you say a cruel word about him, but you always say it very clearly and intelligently, and you have your point of view. So I always like to hear it. There has to be some way that you were disappointed, maybe not. Were you disappointed in the fact that he stood down on this government shutdown? I mean, it did seem like Pelosi, out of that shutdown at least, got what she wanted.
What did they call us? What did that commentator call us? The 10-toothed MAGA-hatting, where, the atavistic deplorable in me was disappointed, but the guy who's read The Art of the Deal was not disappointed. Just think about two issues. The FAA and the TSA had made the president's position untenable. When you start shutting down LaGuardia Airport, that's a kind of pressure point that's just going to snowball in a matter of hours. But what did the president do? He gave a speech in which he said, I give you until February 15th, and then I will use everything in my power, which means national emergency, to build the wall. And the master stroke drew is, and this is what happened yesterday in the afternoon. He gets the State of the Union. Now think about that. The window, the 3 weeks, although it's not going to be today, it's going to be February the 5th. He's going to be in the chamber of the House for 2 hours, and he's not going to be talking about the Laffer curve and your tax refunds. He's going to be talking about the wall for 2 hours. The platform that gives him to drive home his message and prepare him to what has he demonstrated in the last 35 days during the shutdown? That he has done everything a reasonable adult could be expected to do. And now he's punted the ball back into the Democrats. And what are they going? We know what they're going to do, Drew. They're going to say no. They're going to refuse. There is no argument come February 16th that you can paint Donald Trump as the man who didn't try everything in his power to do things the way it should be done. And now he has to resort to national emergency. So, it really is. I hate people when they say he's playing 8-dimensional, Vulcan chess. But in this case, it was a pretty slick move.
He does seem to be strategizing because he has been very un-Trumpy of late. He's been very reasonable. He's given them anything they could ask for. They've been Even the Washington Post is urging them to negotiate with him. So he must be being fairly reasonable. What do you think of the immigration hardliners like Ann Coulter, who's constantly ripping into Trump, but she does represent a section of the party that feels that any kind of concession is the wrong concession, that the whole point of Donald Trump is that he's going to crack down. Do you feel that this is a helpful spur to Trump, or is she just annoying?
At this point, she's lost her. She's off her rocker. I mean, the statements that Ann Coulter has made. It must be to sell a new book. It's just absolutely absurd. But I get this a lot, especially from hardcore Trump supporters here in Virginia. And I say to them, even friends, I say, look, hang on a second. I get your point. I'm an immigrant. I got in line. I had to pay my money. I had to get my green card. I had to take an exam on whether I knew my Civics 101. But as a Judeo-Christian nation, we do not punish the children for the sins of the parents. So nobody gets to jump the line. I would say nobody who came here illegally, whether they were a minor or not, gets American citizenship. But if you're a minor, you get to the back of the line and you get some kind of work permit. I don't see the deplorable argument that a 6-month-old illegally carried across the border should be deported. That's not who we are. But it doesn't mean they get citizenship either.
Yeah, it does seem there is some kind of reasonable way forward. Even when Trump was primarying, I would say people who think he's going to deport 11 million people are just dreaming. The American people will not stand for it.
But he won't either.
Yeah.
He won't either. That's not who he is.
Right.
I mean, I know the left will never believe it, but the Donald Trump I know from working during the campaign and working with him in the White House is a truly compassionate man. You go to back to the Parkland shootings. He didn't need to invite any of those survivors to the White House, but he wanted to invite those kids to the White House. This is a man, the stories now that have come out over the last 50 years of what he has done privately to help people who were in dire straits, which he never advertised. That famous story where he was buttonholed once. A car was broken down at the side of the road. He stopped to help them out. Turns out these people were in desperate straits, and the reporter says to him 5 years later, is it true that you silently paid off that couple's mortgage? And he was caught like this, and he said sheepishly, yeah, I did. That's Donald Trump. He doesn't bang a drum about it. He doesn't, on Facebook get out a bottle of beer and talk about it. Donald Trump is a compassionate, for all the braggadocio, he is a compassionate man, and he's not going to deport people who were children when they came here. Honestly, really. It's like Selena Zito's line. We had her on the show yesterday. The Trump supporters take him seriously, not literally. the people who never get Trump take him literally and never took him seriously.
No, it's absolute. It is true that, and he has said this from the beginning that he wasn't going to do that. And I just think anybody who thinks the American people will turn on their TVs and watch people deported en masse is out of their mind. Does not know what this country is all about.
The left would do that to people they disagree with. Drew, when I was in the White House, there were people on Capitol Hill who called for me to be deported. That's the tolerance of the left. That's how that's how tolerant they are of immigrants.
Yeah. So go back to for a minute to this emergency powers thing. There is an argument from both the left and the right that I'm kind of sympathetic with, that using emergency powers opens the door to the left, who will be in power again sometime, to use emergency powers for things that their little obsessions. So, for instance, the one that everybody worries about is guns. You know, there's a shooting, there'll be some mass shooting, we can bet on it, and the left suddenly says, oh, well, we declare an emergency situation and we are, collecting guns. Do you have any sympathy with that argument? Do you see any dangers, moral dangers up ahead with the idea of declaring an emergency?
Well, look, there's always kind of moral hazard issues with these kinds of measures, but I think it's a straw man argument. People need to do a little bit of research. Ken Kuklowski, a constitutional lawyer who writes a lot for Breitbart, we had him on the show, and he was very clear. People need to check this out. We already have 31 national emergency statutes in place that are active now. There's one dating back to 1979 and the Iranian Revolution that is still in place. The idea that this is some dangerous button that if you press it is irreversible. There's already more than 30 that are in place right now. And the other thing is, let's look at the facts. 72,000 people died of overdoses last year. 90% of whom was a result of opioids that have been smuggled across the southern border. How is that just prima facie not a national emergency? I mean, we had how many people died in Vietnam? 50. And now we have 72,000? That by itself, let alone the human trafficking, the rapes, the assaults of the women that are trafficked across the border, MS-13, what's going on in Mexico, by itself, if that isn't a national emergency, I don't know what qualifies as a national emergency.
Here's a larger question that I really want to ask you, because you and I, a long time ago, we had a conversation about whether or not the original Trump team had been replaced with basically, straight line Republican establishment figures who were guiding the Trump administration away from a Trump revolution into something more, acceptable. Where do you think Trump stands? I mean, with guys like Steve Bannon gone, you were gone from the administration. Is the Trump revolution still a revolution, or is he now basically a kind of conservative Republican president?
I'll use a Andrew Klavan line on you.
Yeah.
Judge him by his action.
Okay.
Look at the last 2 years. Is he less MAGA today than he was when he was campaigning? I think he's just as I think the shutdown shows you just how MAGA he is. He didn't want to cave, but he had to give a window to demonstrate just how radical the Dems are. The flip side of that is, I can tell you right now, I won't give you the names, but there's less than 5 people in the White House who are hardcore MAGA people who came in with the president. And it is remarkable that despite the number of, I won't say swamp creatures, but establishment GOP who are around the president, that he is still every day achieving as much as he is achieving. But look, as long as John Bolton is there, as long as Mike Pompeo is there, as long as Sarah Huckabee Sanders, as long as Bill Shine are there, you have people who are committed to the president's vision and are helping the president realize what we elected him to do.
Will he get the wall, and will he get it without an emergency declaration?
I think right now, look, the Democrats aren't going to give him anything by February 15th. I think he declares national emergency February 16th, and he's going to start building the wall in earnest.
All right. Sebastian Gorka, his new show is America First on the Salem Radio Network. I highly, highly recommend it. It's always good to see you. It was really interesting. Thanks a lot, Seb.
Looking forward to the new book. Thanks, Drew.
Thanks. I should mention, too, we should plug his book, Why We Fight, which is really different than you think it would be. A very, very interesting take on kind of the geopolitical situation and where the real dangers are, why we fight. I want to end